Alright, you watched The Walking Dead, I watched The Walking Dead. Season 3's come and gone, so let's talk about it, shall we? Really, this is a season that the fans have been waiting for. We got past the setup, we got past the farm, God knows we took a long time at the farm, and now we're finally on the fan-favorite stuff from the comic books, mainly the governor and the prison. So when Season 3 was, being advertised and being hyped up, obviously I was more than a little excited about it because I just had this feeling like, now that the writers did what they needed to do to set up the characters, to set up the situation, they can finally do what they want to do. And overall, I think as a whole, Season 3 definitely delivered. I admit when we first saw the governor, I wasn't really too crazy about the actor who was playing him. In the comic books, he takes on much more of a sort of Danny Trejo style, just big, burly, badass sort of guy. And here he's kind of more of a baby face. But as the season sort of went on, especially towards these last few episodes pretty much pretty much anything after the mid-season break, the governor really started to peel back his layers and become the evil bastard that we all wanted him to be. But yeah, I'll admit that when we first got to Woodbury, I don't know, it's like I knew the writers were just taking it in a direction where, he's just putting on a facade, and he's just trying to be a nice guy, and I don't know, I guess it worked, because it genuinely fooled me, because I was like, really, this is the governor? That's a little bit tame. So I guess kudos to the writers for that, because we really did see the psychopathic governor come out by the end of the season. It took a while for the season to get going. When they first moved into the prison, it was fine. I was really disappointed that they killed off all the prisoners that were already there. The show kind of has a bad habit of just introducing a group and then either killing them off or just completely writing them out. A good example of a group that was completely written out is the group that Randall was involved in, the kid who they held captive in the second half of Season 2 after the bar standoff. Seriously, whatever happened to that group? Were they from Woodbury? Are they just some random collection of people? I don't know. It just kind of bothers me that the show doesn't really follow through with certain details like that. The season really started to kick into high gear when everyone's favorite one-armed badass, Merle Dixon, came back into the picture. Merle was, he was actually really the reason I started getting into the show in the first place. I'm pretty sure I initially missed the pilot episode, so I saw episode 2, which I believe is the one where Merle is up on the rooftop. He's having his confrontation with T-Dog. And, of course, Rick handcuffs him. That whole confrontation is really what sold me on the show. I didn't go back and actually watch the pilot until much later after Season 1 had already ended and come out on DVD. So seeing Merle back was a huge... I knew he was going to be back. They had promotional material with him, with that spike on his, with that fake arm spike thing that just became such a major part of his character. So I was really excited to see him back. I definitely thought his introduction was really great when he runs into Michonne and Andrea for the first time. And yeah, overall, I was slightly disappointed that they killed him off. I kind of understand that too much of a good thing really, with a character like that who's so larger than life and just such a camera presence, you can't really have too much of him. And I understand that story-wise, it would have been really difficult to actually work him back into the group, and you can't just really have him be his own entity, so I understand that they did what they did. Now, one of my favorite aspects of the season is Rick's psychotic meltdown, and it's still going on. He's still seeing Ghost Lori. And yeah, first of all, kudos to the writers for killing off Lori. It's funny because I really kind of feel like the way they handled the deaths this season was just like, alright, let's see, what characters do the audience not care for? So, of course, we had Andrea, who I'll get to in a little bit. And then we also had Lori and T-Dog sort of biting the bullet. I mean, I don't know, on The Talking Dead, they came out that T-Dog sort of had a fan base, but, I mean, how much can you actually judge The Talking Dead for accuracy? They're, you know, it's just a product of AMC built to promote that show. But from day one, all the fans had a problem with Lori. So, yeah, I'm glad that she went out the way that she did. I'm glad that they made it just super duper dramatic, that Carl basically had to put her down Old Yeller style. That was brutal. And I felt like the scene at the end of that particular episode where Carl and Maggie walk out, Carl has Judith, and then Rick realizes what happened, and he realizes that Lori's dead, and he just has that huge meltdown. I think that that's probably, for my money, maybe the second best ending to the show. The first still being the infamous barn episode where Sophia walks out as a zombie and Rick has to put her down. I think that episode is just a crowning achievement of the show. But this was a good close second. And overall, I'm really enjoying just how much development we're putting into Rick. I really like the fact that Rick is such an interesting and complex main character. When you compare Rick to other sort of main characters in shows like this, I'm thinking specifically of Lost and Jack Shephard. I mean, Lost is a show where, most of the interesting characters kind of revolved around the main ones. Like, we had characters like Ben and Hurley, and really the main characters like Jack and Kate were just sort of there to advance the plot. But with Rick, I definitely feel like Rick's just written in a way that, as a main character, you really want to find out what happens to him each week. He really is the focal point of the show, and I'm really glad that they got his character down so well. Speaking of Lost, Herschel Green has always been one of my favorite characters on the show, and he really has a John Locke quality for me. He's sort of the spiritual compass of the show. He's the one where, while everyone else is just sort of looking at the situation in a very cut and dry sort of manner, Herschel kind of looks at the moral implications and the humanity of it all. He's sort of like a better version of Dale, in all honesty. I really love the fact that they've kept him around. According to The Talking Dead, they were actually going to kill him off at the end of Season 2. So I'm so glad that they decided not to do that. I'm really glad that he didn't get killed off in Season 3. When the governor first made his the first assault on the prison, and Herschel was just kind of limping, he was kind of crawling away from the gunfire, I thought for sure, I was like, okay, Herschel's going down. The writers are just itching to do it. Herschel's going down now. But nope, I mean, the dude's an old badass. He's got one leg, but he's just really hung in there, He's just a great character. The only moment with Herschel I didn't like was in the finale, after Carl shoots the kid from the governor's side, and Herschel basically just pulls a Dale on us all, and he just goes to Rick, and he's just like, oh, I don't think that boy of yours is right. And it's like, I don't know. I mean, that's a whole moral debate, the whole thing about Carl killing that guy. But personally, regardless of whether he's right or not, I don't think it was something that Herschel should have painted like, oh, your boy, he's turned into a bit of a psychopath, was basically what he was saying. That's just profiling the darn kid. I mean, I don't know. I feel like it should have just been like, I'd keep an eye on that boy, not like, oh, Rick, that kid's going to be a serial killer. I just know he's going to be a serial killer. I just felt that Herschel was quite literally jumping the gun on that call. I was quite happy with the way that they handled Michonne throughout the season. At first, like everyone else, I was sort of like, well, they're not really giving her much of a personality. She's just sort of quiet. She's just, very reserved. But at the end of the day, that really is her character. She is quiet, she is reserved, she is very stoic. And I felt like the writers really did a good job of showing her struggle to integrate into Rick's group in the second half of the season. There's a few moments that I really love from her. My favorite line of hers this season is when Merle has her all tied up and he's like, "Well, I thought you'd run by now." And Michonne's just like, "Huh, I wanted to grab my sword before I got away." I love stuff like that, and I love her sword. She's such a badass, and I can't wait to see where her character goes from here, especially now that she's not completely emotionally tied up in Andrea. But to be fair, she wasn't really tied up in Andrea for about half the season, so yeah, I really like the way that they kind of grew and developed her character over the course of these episodes. Andrea, on the other hand, oh boy, Andrea. I mean, you've gotta wonder what the writers were even thinking with her this season. You've kind of got, I mean, I feel like they had her death planned out from the beginning. I feel like they had this whole story of her trying to sort of be this diplomatic presence in between the middle of the two sides. It's just the way that they executed it. I feel like they wanted us to feel like, "Oh, poor Andrea, she really tried her best." But, I mean, let's face it, when it actually happened and she actually did die, the only reaction anyone had was just like, well, I mean, you know, she kinda deserved it. And, I mean, really, she kinda did. It's like she was just a train wreck this season. You know, it's like she trusts the governor even right after he just throws something at her that would just raise a red flag with anyone. And, I don't know, just she was constantly whining. Her constant, like, "Well, guys, you know, I don't think that there has to be any more killing." It's like, get a grip, lady. I'm glad she's gone. I mean, I just think it's funny that the writers sort of failed at giving her a sympathetic and heroic death, and instead she was, you know, all the fans were just sort of waiting for it to happen. And I also really liked Benjamin Linus this season. I didn't know that they were going to cross over Lost and The Walking Dead with Benjamin Linus coming into the fold. But he had a good role. I really liked how he kind of skirted the line with the governor between being the governor's lackey and being someone who is looking out for the greater good. And of course, by Benjamin Linus, I mean the character of Milton, who, let's face it, is just a splitting image of Benjamin Linus. I can dream about a Walking Dead and Lost spinoff, can't I? I can dream. If there's one thing that the writers did absolutely right this season, it was doing a great job in establishing just what the stakes were. I felt like this was really where the show sort of turned into a post-apocalyptic power struggle, and I just love that. I love how no one on either side is really ever 100% comfortable with the situations they're in, or 100% comfortable with the people who are leading them. I really just love how there's just this sense of unrest that goes throughout the whole show. Obviously, like a lot of other people, the episode with Morgan, Clear, was my favorite episode this season. I mean, that's just a sheer, obvious standout. And it's been reported that the guy who actually wrote that episode is going to be the showrunner for Season 4, and he's going to take the show in a more psychological direction, and it's going to be much more about, like, the mental states of the characters and what they're emotionally going through. And I think that's absolutely perfect. I think that's just what the show needs. I feel like Season 3, while it was good on a whole, I feel like there were some sort of forced plot points to get the governor action rolling. And so I don't know, I'm just really optimistic about Season 4. I think Season 4 is really, if the episode Clear is any indication, it's really gonna be where this show really takes off and hits its stride. But I guess the big question is, where in the holy hell is the governor? What happened to him? I love that shocking scene of him just completely massacring all the army. That I didn't see coming at all. I was watching with my dad, and my dad just had a reaction like, I mean, he just about flew out of his chair when that happened. It was just totally shocking. So, now that the governor has essentially just become his own sort of entity, you've got to wonder what the writers are planning with him. And one of my theories is that because it's obvious at this point that the chronological order of the show and the comic books are much different, and they have a lot of liberty when playing around with the events of the comic books and when they're actually going to happen. I almost sort of think, would it be outside the realm of possibility to think that the governor and the two guys that are with him are going to run into the saviors, who are now the big villains of the comic book? If that happened, I'd love that. And Negan from the comic books just needs to make an appearance with his, with his big barbed wire lined baseball bat named Lucille. I mean, that dude is just, he's basically the governor without the pretense of being a nice guy, and he's even more ruthless than the governor. So yeah, we need to see Negan's crazy ass on here one of these days. The name of the game is breaking you in front of them. I'll slide my dick down your throat, and then you'll thank me for it. Yeah, I mean, get that dude on the show right frickin' now. So in conclusion, it really was a really good season. I feel like the show hasn't really delivered a perfectly flawless season yet, and I'm hoping for that in season 4. There were some minor writing issues that kind of bothered me. I was sort of disappointed that we didn't get to see the governor come back at all after his big scene. Yeah, I was a little disappointed in a lot of the finale, to tell you the truth. And honestly, Glenn and Maggie, there's some characters like Glenn and Maggie in particular that I feel like the writers just aren't really doing a lot with. To tell you the truth, I honestly feel like if they would have just gone full-blown and had the governor rape Maggie, I feel like that whole plot line of what happened between Glenn and Maggie after that would have just been just a little more realistic. I mean, you know, don't get me wrong, what the governor did to them was pretty horrible, but I just feel like going the extra mile would just add a lot of credence to all the drama that we saw in between them that really took up a lot of screen time. But in general, I'm really quite satisfied with the way that the writers are going with this show. I'm extremely happy that they left the governor, because let's face it, a lot of people wanted to see the governor die, but I feel like now that he's just at the height of being a psychopath, it'd be just a waste to kill him off right now. It'd honestly be like in Breaking Bad if they killed off Gus as soon as Gus revealed that he was super evil. I mean, what fun would that be? So yeah, season 4 would be a hell of a ride. I'm hoping for a lot of the governor. I'm hoping they work him back in a believable way. But I'm also hoping that they live up to their promise and make the show much more psychological. So yeah, cross my fingers that it'll be good, and we'll see you in October.